So here we are with another video, and I just want to talk a bit about character because I finished the Marvel Essentials collection of Iron Fist, and I really enjoyed it. And it helped me put, well, I should say, it helped me kind of make sense of something that I had read last year. So a few years ago, I bought the book Manga in Theory and Practice. And I bought that, and it was by the creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And it took me a while to read it because, things kind of happened. And, so I kind of went off and on the reading it. But, you know, life changed last summer. So I sat down and I gave myself a chance and I read it. And in it, he talked heavily about the importance of character. And one of the things he talked about is not allowing your character to have a moment of regression. Like, don't ever pull your character back. Your character should always be moving forward. And, one of the examples that he used is sort of like the tournament style. And I get what he means by that. You know, when you have tournament style comics or tournament style manga, your character never fully has time to be extremely fleshed out, because there's always times where they can pull back because it always starts at the beginning of the tournament, through the tournament, then the ending of the tournament, and then they go on with their lives, and then it's starting the process all over. And he felt that it was not a very good way to go because it forces your character to have this constant regression. And I have to agree because one of the things I enjoyed, in reading the Iron Fist collection is that it was heavily action packed, and so it was a constant adrenaline rush for me as the reader because every issue, it just kept pushing. It just kept pushing. It kept pushing. And, it was one of those things where it was sort of like I felt like I was ready for him to take a break, but, he never got that break. And by the time that the series ended, in the collection, he was a much different person than who we had been introduced to. And that was satisfying in a way versus, the feelings that I had in reading Middle West, where, we had this moment of, progression, and we had Abel starting to grow, starting to change, starting to find himself, and then suddenly he decides he just gives up. And so we have this immediate regression and he becomes an extremely unlikable character. So why does that become important? And this is something that for me as a writer, it is definitely worth looking at because when you're writing your characters and you're putting your characters in situations, they say for the act two, there should always be applied pressure because you want everything to move forward. You never want a time where you never do want a time where your character regresses. Like your character should never look the same at the end of the story and as they did at the beginning, because what happens is somewhere along the line you end up losing your readers. And it's important too because when you think about real life, you're always going to end up in situations that are going to have to force you to move forward. Now, one of the things that I had to talk about when I took hermeneutics is that there's a sort of spiral, and life happens on that where it's the same thing comes around again and again and again. So we don't get surprised when the same sort of event or the same sort of feeling or the same sort of like tragedy, or whatever keeps coming around again, because what's supposed to change is our response to it. And so the spiral is always supposed to be going up. And that's sort of why, the concept of don't let your character regress made a lot of sense to me, because in our lives, the best, most well-rounded people are people who learn how to adapt, people who go through things and they allow themselves to change, and they allow themselves to get better at it, and they allow themselves to sort of, advance upward on the spiral kind of thing. And so in creating characters, for Iron Fist, because Iron Fist is a kung fu artist, and so you had nothing but fight after fight after fight, and you felt for him because you wanted him to have a break, and then he didn't have a break, and he got so busy into fighting that even he realized, oh my goodness, I haven't had time to train, because it's just been non-stop pressure. And even the way that they approached the training, it wasn't like it was a reverting back. It was still a pushing forward, because okay, I'm now bringing extra balance to my life. I'm admitting that this is the life that I'm going to be having. I'm going to be this superhero. That means I have to take it seriously. And yeah, the more he moved forward, the more he moved further. And forgive me, because I'm still kind of excited from reading the series, and even just talking about it just makes me a little bit excited, because you could see the progression of him as a character, which is what I really kind of want to emphasize on this, is the more that he progressed, the more that he progressed through the story, through all the fights, through all the danger, through the friendships that he built, through the engagements that he had, it rooted him further and further into Earth and further away from Kunlun, which is, at the beginning, that's just where he wanted to go back to after, the vengeance didn't happen the way that he wanted, but he knew, okay, at that time, I have to wait 10 whole years. And so, we go from, I'm just waiting for the 10 years to come around again, to now I'm rooting myself and establishing myself, and I'm making a life for myself, and I'm building relationships, and, getting himself settled and forcing himself to grow further as, a martial artist, and to settle himself into being the Iron Fist. And, the last sort of issue was, his power had been taken away. And so it was a contrast between, him as Iron Fist and the Steel Serpent, who, the Steel Serpent, I guess you could say he never had character growth. So it's, so even in that, you have this great kind of contrast, because you have Danny Rand, who, was discovering himself as Danny Rand, who was working as was working as Iron Fist, who saw himself as just Iron Fist, who, was progressing through and learning the limits of his power and things like that, versus Steel Serpent, who, he started off from a place of pride. He failed to become the Iron Fist because he believed he was just supposed to. And, as you read it, it didn't go well because he was prideful. And in his pride, he failed. And so instead of taking that failure and learning from that failure, and learning to make a life for himself once he was banished from Kunlun, he instead built up anger, built up resentment, wanted revenge against Danny's father, never got that. So then you want revenge against his son, because his son became the Iron Fist that you believed that you were supposed to be. So your pride never changes. And so you take the power from him, but then that power overwhelms you, because in your pride and in your arrogance, you had no idea what it was you were dealing with and working with, versus Danny, who had taken the time to understand himself, to understand what he was working for, to understand those things. And, that is that's really the beauty of a well-rounded character. And so, you know, I do believe that building your character is incredibly important, and putting constant pressure on them in, in terms of the story, whether it's outside pressure or inside pressure, putting pressure on them is definitely a usable and great mechanism to force your characters to have to grow and change. Because if you're not going to have characters that grow and change, and remember, for me, this is incredibly important as a writer. You're going to inevitably fail at the storytelling because you're going to begin losing your readers when when your character, especially your main character, when they constantly have these moments of regressing. And I think that that's why a lot of the current books and current comics and things have that failure, because you have it where they never truly progress as people. They never change. They always stay the same. They usually tend to be more like Steel Serpent, who was a villain, where they maintain their level of arrogance. They maintain their level of pride. They seek validation instead of moving forward, instead of, working for things. They just want you to tell them that they are, that what they do, that they are perfect, that they are great, that they are, whatever it is that makes them feel happy. And, right now I'm watching Lock and Key on Netflix, and I really want to do a review on that because, but to make my point about the character, there is this moment in, Lock and Key in episode 4, I believe, where I forget the girl's name, but where she decides that she is going to utilize the power of the key at school. Now, it was already clear that she was going to do that, which is why she brought the music box. And, and so we had this moment of where before she had been someone who, was at least trying to be thoughtful, at least trying to make sense of things. We had this clear regression where it's that kind of progressive, it's that progressive thing of, I want to do what I want to do. And even when the person that she claimed she was defending said, I don't need you to do this, she proceeded to do it anyway because someone else who was just as nasty and vicious as she was said, yeah, let's keep going. And that and that is like that's modern storytelling in a nutshell. You have where you have, I know I'm so full of excitement. But that is modern storytelling in a nutshell. That moment where you never stop and you never think, and you don't have pressure applied on you, but you take a moment and you take things too far yourself, and you act more villainous. And because, right, that's really the thing. Your hero is always the one that grows. Your hero is always the one that grows. Your hero is always the one that pushes forward. Your hero is the one who is significantly changed, such as Iron Fist was, where he wasn't the same at the beginning as he was at the end, and your villain is normally like your Steel Serpent, where they rarely learn the lessons that cause them to grow. Another one would be Joy Meacham in the series, where it's the same thing, where you get yourself into trouble because you refuse to see reason because you believe you know it all. And so, yeah, I do love the subject of character. And so, by all means, take that for what you will, take the subject for what you will, but certainly I would suggest reading things like Iron Fist and, just reading good stories where you see characters change. This Iron Fist series came out like well before I was born. So, it's nice sometimes to go back and read those kind of comics where everything was about being action packed and it wasn't about sitting around talking about feelings and emotions, because when it comes to characters, especially when it comes to action characters, they're not going to necessarily have time, nor should they have time to sit around and talk about their emotions and feelings, because there should be a high level of pressure and responsibility. And that's all I have to say on the subject of putting your character under pressure. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do the bell stuff for notifications, share this, do all of that, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.